We are a group of friends, bound by our appreciation for liberty and good podcasting. Free-minded thinkers from all walks of life, our values come together with one accord to discuss the common culture and news of the day, along with whatever random crap is going on in our lives. Welcome to the Union of the Unknowns.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Union of the Unknowns presents a Chin Wag for Your Health, Part 3. With me today is my co-host and fellow unknown, Terry Canary. How are you doing, Terry?
Hello, Ashley. Good to see you. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I will be hosting today, but there isn't too much to even talk about. We're going to get right into it. So our topic for today is going to be EMFs and just providing a little bit of information for that if you're not familiar. And Terry's going to go ahead and kick us off. Over to you, Terry.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah. So I thought, being a bit of a sciencey guy who likes physics, I thought I'd give us a bit of a quick introduction as to what we're actually talking about, which might be superfluous for intelligent people like yourself and a lot of our listeners and viewers, but for completeness, I thought it might be a good idea. So we're talking about EMF, which is electromagnetic fields, and electricity and magnetism are both what physicists regard as field effects. So they're sort of action at a distance things. And people like Faraday worked out that they were connected. And in fact, you could use changing magnetic fields to create electricity, which is the principle of a dynamo, for example, or a generator. And vice versa, you can use changing electric fields with magnets to create motion, which is an electric motor, for example. So a clever Scottish guy in the 19th century called James Clerk Maxwell worked out that the reason these had an effect on each other was they're kind of two sides of the same coin, and that you could get propagating electric and magnetic fields sort of leapfrogging each other through space at the speed of light. And then people realized that's what things like light was. So and that's where you get the idea of electromagnetic radiation, which is a sort of propagating electromagnetic field that goes through space at the speed of light. And visible light is just one type. You get a whole spectrum of radiation, which is given out by bodies like the sun and all the stars in the universe. And it ranges from long wave, low energy radiation, like radio waves, through infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, X-rays, and then gamma rays. So this radiation is natural, but here on Earth, we're not exposed to a lot of it because we have the good fortune that the Earth's atmosphere absorbs a lot of the radiation that is bad for us. So we don't get much gamma rays and X-rays coming down to Earth because that's absorbed by parts of the atmosphere or things like the Van Allen belt. Similarly, we don't get some only part of the ultraviolet radiation comes down to Earth, and a lot of radio waves are also absorbed. So we're sort of adapted to the ones that the atmosphere is transparent to, which is why our eyes can see invisible light, because the atmosphere is transparent to visible light. But you know, our body's not really adapted to radiation that we don't see very much. So that means that when man introduces this type of radiation into the environment, it gives the body a challenge that it's not used to, which is why EMFs and radiation can be a problem to us. So that's my quick sort of 101 guide. What do you think, Ashley? You got any questions or comments?
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good introduction on the entire, the idea of EMFs and how some may think and probably myself as well, when you hear EMF, you just automatically think of like what is put off by the devices, by the wireless internet and things like that. But actually, as what you were saying, it is naturally occurring here on Earth. But because we have a nice, hospitable environment for humans, that we are, a lot of the exposure that we would be able to have naturally could be healthy for us. For example, smart exposure to UV rays and certainly the infrared light and things like that are healthy for us as human beings. But I was hoping that we could kick it off after your intro with talking about the biggest sources of EMFs that we need to really be aware of in today's environment. What do you have for us on that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to make the point that the dangers of these things are real, and there's been a lot of research done, particularly in Russia, but also in the West, by people who've recognized the problems with things like microwave radiation, for example, which is what you get from your mobile phone, and also electric fields and magnetic fields, stronger than, the Earth has a magnetic field, but if you're exposed to stronger fields than the body's used to, or that we've evolved to kind of adapt to, then you can get problems. So you were asking about the types of radiation to worry about, and in the sort of health field, people worry about three different things, which are electric fields, which is what you get from electric currents passing through your wall, and you'll get an electric field effect around that cable. And similarly, you'll get magnetic fields, which, like I say, are kind of two sides of the same coin. So you'll get strong magnetic fields from certain electrical devices as well. And you also get electromagnetic radiation, which can be a problem to the body, particularly from phones. So microwave radiation tends to be the one that most people are worried about, because that's what mobile phone masts are giving out. And in the old days, when you're talking about 1G and 2G, they were using certain radiations which were very low energy but quite penetrative. So that's kind of, the low energy is a good thing, but the penetrative thing is a bad thing. And when you get to things like 5G, they use much more energetic, higher frequency radiation. So they are probably a lot worse for you. I don't think there's been an awful lot of research done into 5G radiation. There's been a lot of research done into 4G and 3G, and people have demonstrated effects on plants and animals in the lab. The good news about 5G is that it doesn't tend to, it's absorbed quite readily by things like buildings and plants and animals. Now, that means that if you're close to it, that's not a good thing, because your body's absorbing it very, very well. But it does mean that things like trees will tend to block them out. So this is why they have to put so many 5G aerials up like if they're trying to make a city 5G compatible, they have to put them very, very frequently, every few hundred yards, I think. So it means it's very bad news for the people living in the building where this 5G antenna is going on, because a lot of people get very sensitized to these things, and some people have terrible health problems once the 5G antenna goes on their building. Because I can talk in a minute about the actual effects it has on your cells, but it means that for someone like me who lives out in the sticks, it's probably not going to be a problem, because I can't imagine they're going to try and wire up our little town with 5G capability. And the 5G aerials they'll put in the city, which is several kilometers away, will probably not get here. So there's good news and bad news about 5G. But if you're next to a tower, it could be a lot of problems. Over to you.
Yes, I was trying to brush up, and I must say that I'm nowhere near your level of information in the subject, but I can ask some questions and see what you have to say about it. But that is one of the things that
Sure.
I watched a video with Mercola, and that's one of the things he was saying, is that it is not going to be as far ranging. And that's why they exactly what you said, that they're going to need to have more of the 5G transmitters, and that it's going to be worse in the cities. And then we can get to some solutions a little bit later on. So I'm going to hold off on that. But one thing,
Hmm.
and you may not be ready to talk about this yet either, but when you get there, I would like for you to address your thoughts on the introduction of certain levels of EMF coinciding with certain sicknesses. So, my friends over on the Knights of the Storm had discussed how, for example, like radio towers became more common, coinciding with the time for what is known as the Spanish flu, which is some actually say is the Kansas flu. But either way, that there was some coinciding there. And then, of course, we remember, and we really talked ad nauseum about the COVID situation. You and I have talked about that many times. Is it anything? What was it? Was it bioengineered? Was it, do viruses exist? Do germs exist? Is this all terrain theory or what? So anyway, I just wanted you, when you're ready in kind of your presentation, to talk about your thoughts on illnesses coinciding with new technology coming out.
Yes, that's very interesting you should say that, because there is a really good book written on that subject by Arthur Furstenberg. I'll put it in my notes here, and I'll put it in our show notes, called The Invisible Rainbow. And his thesis was, in fact, that all major, a lot of major pandemics in modern worlds were linked to the rollout of a particular type of wireless technology. So I think the what we call the Spanish flu was linked to the rollout of widespread rollout of wireless telegraphy. And there were stories at the time of telegraph operators getting very ill after, from operating their wireless telegraphy machines all day. So it's the same sort of idea. They're getting exposed at very short range to, quite powerful radio waves. Not as damaging as frequency as 5G probably, but if you're sitting right next to it, it's probably not great. I was going to tell you this story about in the World War II, there was servicemen would sit in front of the the radar antennas if they were going off for a weekend with their girlfriends, because it was known that it would have this short-term effect of making them infertile, and maybe a long-term effect as well. So that was kind of well known amongst the servicemen at the time. So it's like I said earlier, these effects are real, and there's been a lot of studies in the lab, and I will talk about them a bit later on. But there are, and it's because we're electrochemical beings. We have this very fine balance of electrochemical reactions going on in our body that are very easily disturbed by small voltages. And unfortunately, the people like I think it's the FCC who regulates wireless telephones and things in America, the Federal Communications Commission. And they, in their sort of safety studies, in quotes, they just look at heating effects, because we know from microwave ovens, which might not be a good idea to use, by the way. Well, we might talk about that in a minute. But from we know that microwaves can heat up organic matter. So, and that they purely look at heating effects from phones, for example, and they say, well, I hold this phone next to this dummy head, and it doesn't heat up very much, so it's fine. So these are obviously safe, but they don't look at these sort of very subtle effects that happen at cellular level. And there's been research done on this, that they affect these things, what are called voltage gated calcium channels, which is what one of the things in the cells that move calcium and other ions in and out of the cell, which is vital for the function of the cell. And these depend on really, really tiny changes in voltages. So you can imagine that a small electromagnetic effect on these things will affect them greatly. And which is why, there's been links to cancers and other health issues. So, yeah. Over to you.
Yeah, that is some very good information there. And, I'm learning a lot. This isn't something that I have done a ton of digging in, although I have known that essentially, having Wi-Fi in your home while being very convenient, and obviously being on our phone, which is also very convenient. And in this digital age, it's something that so many of us do, and I certainly am guilty of being on my phone way too much, being online way too much, and having this exposure to constant Wi-Fi. And I even have a worse habit, which is I sleep with my phone on my nightstand. So it's very close to my head. I usually listen to a podcast or an audiobook or something when I'm going to bed. So I know that that is not a healthy habit. um, but it is something that I struggle with, of trying to do away with that, or trying to, ditch Wi-Fi, or things like that. And I just wish that our health was not always under attack. Over to you.
Yes, yes. Well, exposure because what dropped out a bit there. Can you still hear me?
You're breaking up just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I saw that. Uh, Apologies, viewers and listeners. It's my crappy internet connection, which drives me nuts here. So, sometimes I pray for the world of 5G. Not really. Fiber optics would be good. Anyway, back to my point. So the bad news and good news. The bad news is that if you look in the instruction book of like your Apple iPhone or an Android phone, it does actually tell you not to hold the phone next to your body, and it recommends holding a distance of, I don't know, several. The danger in this. So yes. So I'll come to recommendations for later on, but one of my recommendations would be, which is what I always do, put it in public, but it's much better for you to not have this thing right next to your head. Or you can use like a headphones and a hands-free set, which would help things a bit. The good news about radiation in general is that it follows what they call in physics an inverse square law, which means the intensity of the signal you're getting falls off as the square of the distance, which means it falls off very quickly. So if you're twice as far from a radiation source as you were before, then you'll only get a quarter of the intensity that you would have done the first time. So the effects fall off fairly quickly. And I actually bought myself some measuring devices, which I might show you later on, to give my house a sweep. And you can, I found that, even with devices that were giving off a lot of energy very close up, if I went sort of a few centimeters away, I would get almost nothing. So, so keeping the phone a little bit away from your head is probably not too bad, but try not to have it next to your body all the time. There's also a lot of reports of like men in particular carrying their phones in their trouser pocket, getting problems with their with fertility, but also getting sort of funny patches of skin on their leg where they have this phone right next to their body. Keeping your phone next to your body is not a good idea.
Yes, I definitely have heard that you should try to keep it away, and I do try to keep it away from my head. Like as far as using goes, if I'm talking to somebody, I usually try to use speaker. One thing I wanted to ask you, did you say wireless devices? Because I had heard that wireless devices were also bad. So like with the Bluetooth use of earbuds and things like that, that we should really try to limit our use to those type of devices. And if we are using headphones, then it would be very preferable to have the wired version of that. Over to you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If I said that was a miss. I misspoke. When I talk about a hands-free set, I meant a wired set. So you wired headphones and a wired speaker. So yeah, the wireless ones are not a good idea because you get wireless radiations directly into your head, which is very bad idea. And in fact, Fiona's gone one step further. You can buy these things. I think they're not AirPods, because that's the iPhone thing. They might be called AirPhones or something. But the idea is that because even if you've got a cable like I have leading up to my head, that gives off a certain amount of electromagnetic it gives off an electric field and a magnetic field close to your head. So it's not really the best idea either. So the idea of these in the body, and then the sound just transmits up this empty tube, just full of air, into your ears. So you've got no electromagnetic radiation anywhere near your head. So and they seem to work quite well. So so that might be quite a good idea. I think they're called earphones. I'll need to look them up, see if I can put them in the notes. But it's a good idea. So yeah, I don't know if you've got anything to say. I'll move on to something else if not.
Yeah, go ahead and tell us what else you have. Our next section that you want to discuss.
List. Yeah, I've got a list of the types of exposure, and we sort of touched on this a bit. So we've got microwaves, which come from phone signals, which we talked about. Magnetic fields, you want to check for damaged cables in your of devices like computers or lights or anything. Very strong magnetic fields. So we tend not to spend a lot of time sitting next to the fridge or the washing machine, so it's not really a problem. Well, I have heard that some women like to sit on one, but moving on from that. Then we've got electric fields. So if you've got if you've got an earth connection, which is a really good idea, so it means that a lot of our devices have an earth connection, but we don't have that here in Spain. I don't think you have that in the US much either. So but they actually reduce the electric field as well. So again, it's a distance thing. So if you're really close to something, when I went around with my meters, which I'll show you guys in a minute, I was quite horrified to find out that some of my lights gave out very strong electric fields close up. One of the ones that I had by my bedside, so I moved that away a bit. But again, it was one of those things where a distance of like half a meter, it was almost undetectable. So again, you don't want to be close to these things. It can be a problem if your bed is in a position where you're right next to some cables in the wall. Now I have a friend of mine who's actually been diagnosed with Lyme disease, and one of his symptoms is he got very strong electro sensitivity now, which unfortunately has happened to more and more people these days. And he found, when he was living in a flat in one of our cities here, or what passes as a city here, it's a very small town really, but because he was in a flat, he was next to all these electrical cables and devices from his neighbors, and he didn't feel very well at all in there. And now he actually lives in a cave and he finds he's doing a lot better. So yeah, that's something to look out for if your bed's next to cables in the wall. Some people could go to the extent of turning off the electricity for at least that part of the house, if you can, every night. And for the wireless as well, it's a good idea. Often your router, or your router, as you guys call it, will have an option for turning off the Wi-Fi signal at night. On my computer that I'm using now, I tend not to use wireless at all if I can. And I just use a Ethernet connection, which is a lot better. So airplane mode is your friend for this sort of thing, and try to avoid using Wi-Fi as much as you can. And then the other thing to worry about is what they call dirty electricity, which is a very fast oscillating electric field. Because of that change in electric field, it has a very bad effect on your body. Now, there's a lot of devices that generate this sort of electricity: LEDs, fluorescent lights, dimmers. Dimmer switches are a very bad idea, because what they do is they when you turn the dimmer switch down, what it's actually doing is it's chopping the electric signal very, very rapidly. So you get this fast oscillating electric field, which has a very bad effect on the body. So, and solar panel inverters, anything that converts DC to AC or vice versa, is doing something similar. So all of these things can generate dirty electricity, which there are ways of cleaning it up in your house. And I bought these things, which I'm going to show you here, showing people at work. This is a meter that you plug into your mains, and it tells you how much dirty electricity you're dealing with. And then you get a filter like this, which you also plug in. You can plug other devices into it, and that reduces the amount of dirty electricity at that particular point. And the advice for these people, these are called Stetzerizer. I think it's an American company. You tend to have to use maybe 5 or 6 to totally sort of clean up your house. More if you've got things like solar panels with inverters, or use a lot of dimmer switches, or best to avoid them, really. And while we're talking about this, I think we've mentioned this before, that a lot of lights they sell you now are not only bad for generating dirty electricity, but they're bad for your eyes and your brain as well. Things like LEDs and fluorescent lights. So we've just been around the local Chinese supermarkets and bought all their old stock of incandescent bulbs, and we've probably got enough to last us the rest of our life now. And because, of course, the EU, in their wisdom, have banned them, so they're not allowed to be sold as new anymore. So, but we're okay. So they're a much better quality of light, don't generate any bad electricity or bad electric fields, and it's more like a natural light. So there you go. Any comments on that?
Yes. So at the beginning where you started talking, you were breaking up kind of bad. So I didn't hear what you were talking about. Were you talking about grounding at first?
Yes. So one way of moderating the bad electric fields and magnetic fields you might have in your house would be to use make sure your house's earth is good and has a good earth connection. But in the UK we have earthed plugs as well. So we have 3-pin plugs. So we have a mains cable and a live and a neutral cable for the mains, but we also have an earth connection which runs round the circuit and goes directly to the main earth cable of the house, and that has a beneficial effect on reducing electric and magnetic fields as well. But we don't have those in Spain, and you don't have those in the US either, I think. Is that right? You just have a 2-pin plug, right?
We have well, I don't know. This is, this might be a better question for Bruce, not for me. But our plugs are have the 2 prongs and the bigger prong at the bottom. So some things can use the 2 prongs and some things use all 3. Right. And the other thing I was going to tell you is that I just got some grounding sheets, actually. So they will use the 1 prong to get into the, to the grounding. What's the word I'm looking for? Frequency, the grounding frequency.
Yeah, so your earth connection.
Exactly, to the earth connection. Yeah. So they have, sheets and grounding mats that you're able to get. And then, of course, some people make grounding shoes and things like that to try to help at least offset some of this. I haven't actually started using my grounding sheets yet, but I have read reports of people discussing that they really didn't realize how big of a deal it was to them until they slept on grounding sheets. And then they really felt much, much better, had a better night's sleep and things like that. And then I would say, well, we always talk about this is not health advice. This is thinking advice. So one of my theories, though, is that, of course, the amount of EMF that we're exposed to, in addition to all the other things that we've discussed that are kind of poisoning us, like we have the poisoning of the soul, like we were talking about with bad news and propaganda and things like that, and a lot of division in social media. but then we have the poisoning of our body from a very corrupted food system. And then we have the
Hmm.
corruption of the medical industrial complex and the corruption of big pharma as well, that are kind of working in conjunction to to basically declare war on our health. But this is one, and this was something in that episode of Mercola that I was watching. This is one of the things that he was talking about, is that the I don't even know what he called them, but basically like the people that are running and pushing for the telecommunications uh industry, basically. He was saying that they are just as powerful and they are not discussed nearly enough. So I think that that could be that was like a little bit of a paradigm shift for me to think about, because I kind of felt like I had a good grip on who was coming after us, or what, in what ways they were coming after us. But I really didn't process and think about it through, like, yes, telecommunications is absolutely part of that, and that they have a lot of money, a very powerful lobby, and they're able to, as you were talking about, um, really with regulatory capture, they're able to get any kind of safety discussion actually squashed. So I just think to, for people, if you're like me and this wasn't necessarily on your radar as much as some of the other health stuff, then this is another factor to consider in our war on health. And I also wanted to have Terry discuss a little bit the regulatory capture element. So, how important is that in what we have going on? And maybe even if you want to talk a little bit about the Starlink satellites, because not only are is like Elon is in the Peter Thiel Palantir CIA continuum, but they're working to essentially create a global network of Starlink. And it has a lot of implications for humanity, for wildlife, and humanity's health, but also our privacy. So it's really convergence of not some great things. Over to you, Terry.
Yeah, you're certainly right about the regulatory capture, because just like the pharma industry, they were able to sort of pretty much capture which is the FCC in the US, and similarly to the pharma story, they've had studies that have shown problems that have been covered up, and they didn't want to publish it. And there was I think I had some in my notes here. There was some guy, one of the scientists who found these problems. I can't see it now, but there was an example where he found a lot of problems in his experiments, and they didn't want to know. When it comes to Starlink, now I looked into this myself, because I was thinking it might be one way I can get out of my awful satellite connection problem. My belief is that the signal strength from Starlink satellites is going to be too weak down here to cause us many problems. I mean, any exposure that you're not signed up for, you're going to get it whether you've got Starlink or not, because it's coming down from up from fake and gay space. But I think the signal strength will be so weak that it won't be a problem. You've got a lot bigger problems from 5G. If you've got a 5G tower near you, or even if you've got a 4G antenna fairly near you, you're probably going to have more problems from that. When I went, the other thing I was going to show you was this. So I bought this meter. I can't remember how much it was, maybe $100 or something. It's called a tri-field meter. It's called a tri-field because it measures electric fields, magnetic fields, and it also measures microwaves from phone masts. And I couldn't find any phone signals strength at all, which is not surprising, because our phones don't really work in the house. You have to go out in the garden if you want to make a phone call, because the mast is way away in the distance, and it's mostly screened by the house next door. So that's kind of good in a way. It's not so good if you want to make a phone call, but it's good for our health. So I don't think Starlink's going to be a problem health-wise. I have mixed feelings about it, because it's I'm not really. I like looking at the night sky. I'm not really very much in favor of a lot of light pollution, and this is a big source of light pollution. And there's the Ukraine thing, of course, as well. So yeah, I don't think Elon Musk is completely to be trusted. But I think, to be honest, if I can get his Starlink and it'll work better than what I've got at the moment, I might have it. Over to you, Cassie.
Yeah, we've talked about that, right? You know, in this kind of conversation that we're trying to have, and in our podcasting, ever since the volcano, your internet has been compromised, and it may seem like not that big of a deal, but just imagine if you're having glitchy internet at all times throughout the day. So I wouldn't blame you for getting a Starlink. You know, we've talked about it because you have kind of gone back and forth on it for a couple of years, whether or not you want to do. And I totally understand that. And the other thing that you were telling me is, and this was a while back, but basically that the preservation of the night sky is very important in La Palma as well, right? Over to you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And one of the unfortunate things about LED lights is, of course, people like them because they use less power. But what it means here is that they've been installing LED streetlights everywhere, which, as I spoke of earlier on, is not good for your brain or your eyes. But it's also a big light pollution problem, and this is supposed to be a dark sky reserve, so it's not a great thing, really. If it's okay with you, I'll talk a bit about the research that I found out that was done about microwave radiation in particular. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. One quick thing that I wanted to add is, and you have brought this up a couple of times, so I just wanted to throw in on that. Yes, the blue light exposure that we have, and this doesn't even, I mean, I'm sure it's related in a way, but it's not necessarily related to our episode, but just the blue light exposure that we have can be very harmful for our circadian rhythm, which obviously we need to have restorative sleep at night. I think that really contributes to a lot of our health issues, is not having a quality night's sleep. It's not regenerative. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, which we've talked about: pharmaceuticals, food, all the things, but light exposure is certainly part of that. And it's really frustrating because most people are not using an LED just because they're like, oh, this is poisoning me, this is destroying my circadian rhythm, right? It's what has been available. It's what has been pushed on them. Most people, including myself, were not really very educated on the LED use. One thing that I do know is the blue light exposure obviously is interrupting and can complicate our just our natural circadian rhythm, and like when the body starts producing natural melatonin and winding down at night, and that it's very destructive for that and can have long-term harm as well as just causing you not a great night's sleep. So I'm going to send it back over to you. Anything that you wanted to add on that, and then go ahead and go into your next section.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things to say about that. It's not just the effects on the circadian rhythm. It's the LED lights in particular, I believe, have been linked to macular degeneration in the eyes, which is a very serious eye problem. So I think your eyes are sort of thriving on natural spectrum light, so that when you give it sort of distorted light spectrum like you get from LEDs, it's they degenerate. So yeah, go outside more and get into the sunshine. As Ashley was saying earlier on, sun has an awful lot of good effects on you, not just vitamin D. There's been other effects discovered recently, like production of nitric oxide, which is a very important chemical for your body. And there's probably lots of other things that we don't even know about. So, we've adapted to be living in the sun and living outside. So get outside as much as you can. What else were you talking about? Oh, the other thing about fluorescent lights I was going to say is that they work via pulsing electricity at a very rapid rate into the gas, which makes it fluoresce. So that's the reason it generates dirty electricity, because of this it's kind of like a chopping effect, like I was talking about with the dimmers. But it's also, a lot of people think that might have a lot to do with what they call sick building syndrome, where you have these typically office buildings where people work all day and they feel really terrible at the end of the day. So who knows whether it was, the office furniture producing chemicals, or it could have been the effect of these rapidly oscillating fluorescent lights. Basically, we know that epileptic people are very sensitive to oscillating light sources like that. So, but it probably affects all of us, really. So I've always hated working under fluorescent lights. I think they're terrible. So so that's something to think about as well. So before I get back to you, I'll just talk briefly about this this scientific research I was going to talk about. So there was this guy, Martin Pall. You could always look up these people, Pall. He was the one who found the effect on these voltage-gated calcium channels, which actually affects the blood-brain barrier as well. So it means that it's going to assist in transporting bad chemicals into your brain. As Ashley points out in the comments here, hospitals are full of fluorescent lights. Hospitals seem to be designed to keep you as ill as possible in many ways. You're stuffed into a place with all these sick people with really bad lighting and horrible building design. Anyway, so then we had this US Navy. He was on the US Navy Office of Naval Research, Alan Frey, and he showed that cell phone radiation weakens the cell membranes and your blood-brain barrier. And his experiments demonstrated that dye injected into animals was able to penetrate into the brain when exposed to pulsed digital signals from microwaves. He was so alarmed by the results of his animal studies that he refused to experiment on humans. He told colleagues at a symposium, and this was back in 1969, so this has been known about for many years. I have seen too much. I very carefully avoid exposure myself, and I have for quite some time now. I do not feel that I can take people into these fields and expose them, and in all honesty indicate to them that they are going into something safe. And he also discovered that people and animals can hear microwaves. He discovered that he could stop a frog's heart by timing microwave pulses at a precise point in the heart's rhythm. The power level he used for that experiment was only 0.6 microwatts per square centimeter, thousands of times lower than the radiation from today's cell phones. So this is pretty scary stuff. And he also found that electromagnetic field exposure in pregnant women was associated with a shorter pregnancy, increased fetal heart rate variability and temperature, and babies born with smaller head and chest circumferences, according to a review of all the scientific findings. So this is pretty scary stuff. The effects are definitely real, and the Soviets in particular were all over this, and they were very careful about installing, things like 5G and 4G technology in their cities. So back to you, Ashley.
Very fascinating information as far as that goes. And I would be curious to what ended up happening to that guy. If the researcher that you were talking about, if he ended up going on to have a longer, a longer lifespan, a longer well span because of his avoidance of these issues. And it certainly starts to get into, okay, so we know that these things are at least known about or at least considered, even if you say, well, it wasn't proven. This is one person's theory. Okay, but you at least know about it, right? The powers that shouldn't be. And then that starts making me think about some of the other, and we would really, you probably have more information on this than me, but it really makes you start to wonder if we know that what we were told about the COVID vaccines was that we saw in studies that it did accumulate in the ovaries and the testes, but it also was able to pass through the blood-brain barrier. And if that was the case, and if they were actually using, so we were told that they were using lipid nanoparticles in order to facilitate, encapsulating the spike protein that they made. And then we also know about the mRNA component. And then we also had people that were concerned about the potential for graphene oxide being used. So it has to make you think, about the possibility, even if the 5G towers that they rolled out and were installing at that time, even if they were not related, it has to make us wonder what effect could they have on people who did take this into their body, knowing what you were just talking about as far as the effect of microwave radiation, timing it with the heart, the fact that these things can pass through the blood-brain barrier. I mean, it definitely seems like there's potential for real harm there. And there's been a lot, we know that we've seen so many people end up having serious health problems that were unexpected after the rollout of the jab. However, I try to be measured in, looking at the situation with people, and sometimes we just don't know. It could be related to that, but I've known people who are absolutely not vaccinated and they still had major health issues. These things did happen before, but it certainly is a consideration about, is there some kind of plan to combine these the mRNA, the lipid nanoparticles, the graphene oxide, if that was actually in there, with the knowledge of being able to manipulate some of this radiation? Over to you, Terry.
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of people who've made that connection, and I remember seeing earlier on people making the correlation between areas where 5G had been rolled out and COVID cases and deaths. Wuhan in particular was a big 5G area. So was northern Italy, where they had a lot of cases. New York City, of course. So I wouldn't dismiss that possibility by any means. I mean, it's possibly a cumulative thing, like we were talking about. We live in a toxic world, and the 5G thing is just adding to the accumulation of other toxins. And if it does have this effect of assisting in the transport of toxins through the blood-brain barrier into your brain, then obviously that's going to be a very bad effect that's coming from it. And so, yeah, I definitely wouldn't dismiss that idea altogether. And there was a kind of COVID connection I remember seeing earlier on in the COVID days, where they were taking advantage of the lockdown, where all kids were being evacuated from schools, to install 5G equipment into schools, and this was happening in America, I believe. So that was kind of, I mean, it was sinister in so many ways, because you sort of thought, you couldn't help thinking, how did these guys know that there were going to be a lockdown and the kids weren't going to be there? So, because these things are planned ahead, and they knew they were going to have this window of opportunity to install the 5G equipment into the schools. It was all very fishy. So, yeah, I wouldn't say they're unconnected at all. Back to you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then, just to sort of put an exclamation point on this conversation is, and we're talking about what it does to us, but we're really not talking about what does it do to a child, because before, the last 20 years, children were not exposed to being bathed in Wi-Fi and EMF and 5G all day in the way that they are now, but they also were not exposed to I lost my thought. Was something else. Oh, just the blue light, the constant blue light, computers and tablets and things like that all the time,
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
they had previously not been exposed to. So what does that do for all kinds of health concerns? I mean, it's so many. And the thing is we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but so many things are connected to so many other things, right? There's reactions that are happening and effects based on these reactions all over. And obviously the heart, the liver, and the gut health are super important. And if these things are being affected, or the blood-brain barrier, and then not even to say, and especially with growing minds, with growing children, but even aside from that, just the effect on us, like, and maybe these things haven't been studied, but part of having a really healthy immune system is having a well-flowing lymphatic system, something that almost never gets discussed, but it is such a,
Yeah.
it's such a surface material, and it's delicate. Our lymphatic system is very delicate, and less responds to much less pressure than, let's say, our our vascular system. And so what happens to that? It's so important for draining out toxins, and for for the health of our immune system, as I said. And so, but it's delicate. So what does that do? And actually, one of the things I was reading recently was discussing that red light therapy can be beneficial for our lymphatic system. So if that particular spectrum of light is healing, that would also tell me that perhaps a spectrum of light or a spectrum of the electromagnetism could be harmful for some of these other delicate yet very important systems to our overall health.
Yes, definitely. We're going to have this as a future talk, wouldn't we? Red light therapy, and it'd be nice to talk about some of the things that you were talking about there as well, the fascia and the lymphatic system and all that sort of stuff, which is in your field of expertise. I forgot what I was going to say. I was going to say something else very important. Oh, yes, babies. We were talking about babies. One of the things I wanted to warn parents off would be the use of wireless baby monitors. So because, you've got these wireless signals right next to your baby's head, not a great idea. So try and avoid those if you can. I was going to talk about some mitigation stuff now, if that's all right with you, and ways to protect yourself. What do you think?
Yep, I think that sounds good. Let's go ahead and talk about some
Great.
solutions.
I got the thumbs up. Yes, for our listeners in audio only, I've got the thumbs up there. So, a lot of these I do. I don't do all of them. Just like we were talking about the healthy eating stuff, I'm not 100% great on everything, but I do try and be good on certain things. So, airplane mode is obviously your friend. So Fiona's very good at this when she's not, wanting to worried about receiving messages on her phone or wanting to make phone calls. She puts the phone into airplane mode, and you can do the same with your computer, obviously, or your tablet or whatever. So as I was talking about with my laptop, try and use fixed Ethernet cables if you can, rather than using Wi-Fi on your laptop, for example. And I've got these devices that you can plug into the wall, and you put an Ethernet cable into them, and it connects up to the router via another plug in the wall over at the router. So they're not 100% ideal because they're supposed to generate some dirty electricity. So you might have to do some mitigation for that as well. But they're probably better than using Wi-Fi. And particularly if you've got your device near your bed, don't have the Wi-Fi signal on when you go to sleep. Ashley, right, this is me and you. Some people go, as we were talking about, some people go to the extent of shutting off the electricity, for, at least to your room if you can. If you've got like a switchboard that's got different trip switches for different sections of the house, that's really great because you can switch off certain sections at night. And I believe you can even buy trip switches that are sort of timed or are designed to come on only when there's a demand for electricity. Someone told me about this the other day. I've never seen them myself, but I believe they're available. That would be absolutely brilliant because then you'd know you'd not get any spurious electric signals that you don't want. Don't stand near your microwave oven when you use them. I wouldn't recommend using microwave ovens at all, actually. One of the spurious, Ashley likes my use of spurious. One of the myths we were told about microwave ovens is that they work by, I think probably everyone was told they work by agitating the water molecules and heating them up. They don't do that at all. They actually agitate all molecules, and they kind of rip a lot of molecules apart. So Lord alone knows what they're doing with some of the nutrients in your food, but I don't really think they're a great idea. But they also tend to leak microwaves, so please don't stand next to them if you're going to use them. because they put out quite a lot of microwaves, and not all of them are sealed 100% perfectly. Try and avoid smart devices as much as you can. These days, when you buy a TV or even a fridge or even a washing machine, they come with Wi-Fi installed, and they're supposed to tell you when you've run out of milk or something on your fridge. I mean, Lord alone knows why you'd want that extra functionality, but you get it whether you want it or not. So our TV actually comes with Wi-Fi, but I've managed to turn it off. So if you do have to buy one like that, try and find out if you can disable the Wi-Fi, because I don't really use the Wi-Fi on my TV at all, and I don't really want to use it. So, ideally, you'd buy a dumb device, and maybe even an old-fashioned dumb phone as well. So, what else have I got? There's an increase in movement amongst electricity companies to install smart meters, which give out a lot of bad radiation, and also can generate dirty electricity and electricity supply. So try and stop them doing that if you can. Obviously, if you live in California, there's the extra danger that they might catch fire and start fast conflagration. So not great things. Try and use incandescent bulbs or halogen bulbs are sort of the next best. They give out a lot of light, and basically use the same kind of technology as incandescent bulbs. So we talked about that earlier on. Keep your phone away from your body and use a speakerphone when you're using it. Use wired earphones or headphones, or these earphones I was talking about earlier on. Turn your devices off at the wall if you can, because TVs, when you put them in standby mode, particularly if they're a smart TV, will be giving out radiation. If you want to sort of go to town screening yourself and your devices, you can get Faraday cages. And I've got a little thing over here. I've got a little bag. I bought a load of Faraday material. It's kind of like tight mesh of metal woven into fabric, and I can put my phone in it if I want, and it totally screens out all signals, so no signals will go in or out. So some people, if they're electrically sensitive, can put this sort of stuff on the walls and use it as bedding. And like Ashley was saying, you can get grounding devices that you can attach to yourself to sleep better at night. So there's all sorts of, there are tons and tons of shops where you can buy meters and fabrics to screen out EMF, and I might put some in the show notes, but there's if you do a simple internet search, you'll find tons and tons of sites that sell this sort of stuff, and you can even make clothing out of them if you want to sort of screen yourself completely. Maybe a full body suit with a hat. Better than a tinfoil hat, works a lot better. You could do what I did, which is buy some meters to assess your risk. And when I went around with my meter, I found that there was very few problems at all, really, because I think I spoke about the fact before that Fiona, my wife, has some health issues, so I wanted to make sure she, the electrosensitivity wasn't one of them. But it doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of problems here, fortunately. Don't live near 5G towers if you can. Overhead power cables can be a problem as well. And unfortunately, there are some people who are so sensitive they have to move to what are called radio quiet zones. I don't know if you know about this, Ashley. There's some couple in America which have been created for radio astronomers. And they don't have any phone towers or sort of extraneous microwave signals or much EMF. Probably low on street lighting, I'm not sure. And there are people that are so badly affected by electric sensitivity, unfortunately, have to move to these areas to get some peace and quiet. So it's a sort of thing, like a lot of things, that if you're a little bit sensitive, it seems to get worse with more exposure and over time. So if you think you've got any problem at all, and you by doing some measurements, you're suspecting that you are a bit sensitive, try and mitigate the problem straight away, because things are just going to get worse otherwise. So I think that's all I've got on that. Over to you.
Very good. Well, first of all, I have a lot of violations in your do not do list. So that's something that I need to think about. But one thing I would say is that if you're wondering if you're sensitive, maybe if you try a grounding mat or grounding sheets and you feel better using that, then that could tip you off that
Yeah,
you do have a little bit of a sensitivity and you may start feeling better by trying to reduce some of this stuff where you can. I'm gonna try to do that myself, and it reminded me, Terry, when you were talking about kind of like it's like if you get too much and then basically like your cup starts overflowing, and that's when you start getting sort of some accumulated effects of that. It reminds me of some of the other things that we talk about as far as like toxin overload, or
hmm,
even something that we started to talk about with the histamine response, people that have mast cell activation and things like that. So, but I would say that
yeah,
perhaps if you're concerned that you are sensitive, then maybe start with a grounding something, or actual grounding. If you can get out there and spend some time, just with your feet on the ground, and if you feel an improvement, then perhaps that's something that would tip you off that you do have a sensitivity to this stuff. Um, Other than that, I want to
yeah.
thank you, Terry. This was a lot of really, really good information. I certainly am no expert at all. This isn't something that I have spent much time digging into, and I think I kind of had the idea like, oh well, they're cooking us, but I really didn't go into a lot of this stuff. So I really appreciate it. Not only all the things that you brought up from an awareness perspective, but the things that we can start doing to try to at least mitigate some of the exposure that we're getting. And I know it's been a quick hour, but you've really talked about a lot of different things that are, you know, food for thought in this aspect. So I want to thank you very much for that. And do you have anything else that you want to add before we take off? Over to you.
No, I think I'm just about finished. Just to round off what you were saying, that the body reacts to, if you're sensitive to this sort of thing, the body reacts in exactly the same way as it would to any other toxin, or it thinks it's under attack, so it generates an inflammatory response. So, like we were talking about earlier on, it can accumulate with other effects. So, um, if I suppose, like you were saying, if you think you're sensitive, try some mitigation things like the grounding mat that Ashley was talking about, or other things, or just if you find you go on holiday somewhere that hasn't got much in the way of 5G, or there's not much electricity, no smart meters and things like that, and you feel better. Maybe it's not just the fact that there's no pollution and you're getting good air. It might be that you're sensitive to this thing, which is exactly what my friend from choir found out. He found out he was electrically sensitive because when he lived in a flat surrounded by all this electromagnetic radiation and EMF, he felt really bad. And when he now lives in a cave with no electricity at all, as far as I can make out, he feels a lot better. So yeah, it's like everything else. Just you're an experiment of one. Find out what works for you, and stick with it, and do some mitigation if you're sensitive to it. So anyway, so I've finished now. Back to you.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Terry. And Terry does our excellent show notes for our show. It's worth it to check them out because he comes up with the best titles for the stories that we find, and there's all kinds of fun little nuggets in there. So I highly recommend checking it out for that. But in this episode, definitely he specifically has some links that he's going to drop to some of these items that he's talked about. So please check that out. And then the other thing that I wanted to let you know, of course, if you want to support the show, if you will like the show, if you share the show, we appreciate that. And then if you want to get in touch with us, you can always find us at our Linktree page, which is unionoftheunknowns.com. And it has all the myriad ways to get in touch with us, from Twitter to our Discord to Gmail and much more. So please feel free to do that. And having said that, thank you so much for tuning in today. I want to thank Terry for all the great information that he has brought. Very nice research, my friend. Thank you so much. And we will look forward to seeing you in our next unknown show. Of course, but we are trying to put together, a few more things concerning our Wag Your Chin for Health series. So, and Terry did say in our notes, how do we get in touch with us? So, luckily, I already covered that, and
I
you all
forgot
know
to
that
ask
now.
the question. I'm sorry.
Hey, that's no problem at all. So, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And then, if you have any questions on this subject or anything like that, feel free to get in touch with us. Get it passed along to Terry, and I'm sure he would be happy to engage in that conversation. Alrighty. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Union of the Unknowns. You can find new episodes every week on all your favorite podcasting networks.